This is Kevin Lee with the eMarketing Association, Did It and Giving Forward. I'm here with Milton Pappas, who's been in the marketing, digital marketing, and e-commerce business for a long time. He and I have probably known each other at this point close to 15 years. And I want to welcome him to the show. A lot of you may have known him when he was busy doing Red Cats or Hudson Bay or Nine West. He's involved in a new AI startup now. Why don't you start off with telling us what you're up to now with your AI startup?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. So thank you for having me. It's great to be here and finally catch up with you. It's been a while. I've been super passionate about technology from a marketing perspective. And, I read this quote the other day, marketing used to be about the RFP and now it's all about the API, right? So to be a marketer these days, you got to understand technology, you got to understand MarTech, et cetera. So basically, I kind of fell into this opportunity working with a friend of mine that's been in the ad tech space for a while for a company called TopLooks. And they've developed this AI where they gather all this data on fashion trends and then can ingest a retailer's product feed and create fashion looks. So creating shoppable commerce, if you will, and leveraging that content into Facebook and Instagram and launching into Pinterest and other advertising kind of channels. So it's fun because passionate about media to drive retail, passionate about technology. So it checked a lot of boxes for me.
Cool. That sounds exciting.
It is. It's very exciting. It's a whole new world for me now, having been in the retail space for so long, and actually, seeking out interesting opportunities from a provider standpoint. It feels good for me to actually be able to go to a lot of my friends in the retail space and say, listen, I have a pretty cool solution for you that can turbocharge your paid social media.
Cool. Well, Milton, you've been in retailers that were pure plays. You've been in retailers that were multi-channel. Obviously, it's a pandemonium during the pandemic now on all sides, and the multi-channels are relying more on e-commerce. But brick and mortar is still a thing, right? People still like to engage in retail shopping experiences as well. So, what do you envision as far as the recovery roadmap for brick and mortar retail, or is it really sort of almost dead?
So, first of all, I don't believe brick and mortar is ever going to be dead. I think there's what we've seen even pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, is we've seen sort of brick and mortar take on like a different objective or meeting a different need from a consumer standpoint. And so, a couple of examples would be you hear a lot about customer experience, and many luxury retailers have really worked on the customer experience to really give the customer a reason for coming to the store and shopping. And there are certain categories that you still need brick and mortar. Grocery is a big one, for example. Fashion, people like to try on the product. So that was kind of pre-COVID, right? So then as we get into the current world that we're in, I think that really what's happened is brick and mortar has become a critical distribution point to actually support many retailers' e-commerce businesses. If you look at Target and Walmart, they have invested in infrastructure and logistics over the course of the last few years, and it really has paid off big time for them now in this environment where they're shipping like north of 40-50% of their product to support their e-commerce business out of their stores, right? Curbside pickup has also become very meaningful now. Buy online, pick up in store. So I think what's happened is you've seen sort of e-commerce stores being repurposed in the world that we're in. Recently I read Amazon is now exploring taking some of these locations that are vacant in malls, some of the old, the stores that have been vacated by these large retailers, and they're thinking about using them as mini distribution points or distribution centers. So brick and mortar is really being redefined, and we've seen an acceleration. I would say in the last 5 months, everybody's saying e-commerce accelerated 5 years in 5 months. So everything that was on the roadmap for 3 to 5 years out kind of like had to be done overnight when the pandemic hit.
Well, you've been very active with the NRF and shop.org as well over the years. Do they share your level of optimism, or are there some voices there that are perhaps not as confident?
For sure, they share the same level of optimism, probably even more so, because it's an amazing organization that I've been fortunate to be part of for quite a while, where really helping to support retailers, and the amount of information that they have made available to retailers during this time is amazing. To be able to support, to support them through this tough time in terms of kind of the day to day, when can stores reopen, how do they reopen, et cetera. So it's an amazing organization again that I've been blessed to be part of, and even more so you see it now in this time of need for retailers.
Right, right. One other trend that sort of had been happening concurrently with the e-commerce trend in general was that increasingly brands were going DTC,
Yes.
right? So things that you would ordinarily only see in a retail environment or on a retailer's website, now all of a sudden they've got their own e-commerce, their own e-commerce platforms. Of course, they wouldn't necessarily have the distribution platforms unless they also did stores. So
Right.
how should the brands think about their acceleration paths or their sort of roadmap for the future, coming out of the pandemic to whatever the new normal looks like?
Right. So, it's a really great question. So, you kind of have the kind of a number of buckets of sort of, direct to consumer brands. You have the retailers that have had the store network that are doing direct to consumer, but first primarily were retailers, right? Then you have some of my favorite D2C brands like Warby Parker. Okay. Warby Parker started as a D2C direct to consumer business, and then they started to open up stores. But the purpose of their stores much different than a traditional retailer. So it was much more of a customer acquisition play, brand engagement, et cetera. So in the world that we're in now, a lot of the D2C brands are really starting to, number one, rethink the purpose of brick and mortar stores. Those that have not really been in D2C or actually, had their own e-commerce sites have tremendously accelerated that now because of the impact that COVID has had on stores, and people, you've seen e-commerce penetration significantly increase now. The grocery category is probably one of my favorite examples, right? I mean, you've seen, some of the major grocers out there, when they report earnings, their online business is up like 75, 80, 90%. And a big part of it is because obviously people are having, consumers are having their product delivered at home, either directly by them or being part of Instacart, et cetera. So I think you really have to have, you have to understand what your distribution opportunities are. You have to understand, how am I going to drive traffic, right? And obviously part of it in terms of what you do, helping retailers drive traffic and maximize marketing spend. So it's really a new world to them. But I think, in the world that we're in now, that has been accelerated tremendously. So.
I just thought of a sort of follow-up question to that, which is, if it's a brand that probably will never be D2C, grocery is what stimulated this thought, right? So there are a lot of brands that you're just never going to see B2C. Breyer's ice cream, it's not going to be direct to consumer.
There is
So,
some
but
ice cream that's direct to consumer now. I do know some brands that are
possibly,
shipping ice cream.
yeah. I guess I should never say never.
Yes, never say never.
Exactly. But I was really more thinking about, what should the brand's sort of CRM and customer touch point strategy look like then? I mean, should they be building a relationship with their customers? Obviously, early in Facebook's sell job to the brands was, we'll be your conduit to the
Right.
consumer. Initially, they pretended like it would be free, and then they pulled the fast one and said, oh, we forgot to mention, now you're going to have to pay to talk to your customer. But in any case, it was sort of initially almost like a CRM, social media CRM that they were pitching, and a
Yes.
lot of brands got really excited about it. But should brands be thinking about sort of a more traditional email-based CRM? Should they be thinking of other touch points that give them some continuity with their customers?
I've always said, so I grew up in the direct response business. Okay. I was at Reader's Digest for a number of years. And really there, we were all about maximizing our customer acquisition, the customer list, how do we segment audiences, et cetera. So fundamentally, if you have a direct-to-consumer business, really what's driving that business is your ability to do very good customer acquisition, your email file, capturing email. You spend a bunch of money, as you know, that you're going to acquire customers, and in some cases you don't make money on that first order. But the opportunity to be able to retain that customer and then email them and do SMS, et cetera, to be able to drive more revenue per customer is really what drives up the lifetime value, right? So, I think at the end of the day, if you have a choice of, can I afford to do e-commerce, have my own business where I'm shipping, et cetera, where I can actually own the customer experience and own the customer in the long run, for me, it's a much better alternative. If it's not viable, then obviously you partner with organizations, right? You partner with the Amazons of the world, you partner with Walmart.com, et cetera. So there are going to be some companies where D2C is not in the cards, but there are alternatives and marketplaces and selling first party on these sites.
Cool. Thanks. I certainly know how things have changed from the perspective of did it working with clients, but I'm curious your thoughts on sort of on a more macro basis, how you believe the agency to client relationships are going to change under the sort of new normal with a bunch of folks working from home on both sides, and sort of how that may impact the process of whether it's creative, the generation of creative, the optimization of creative, the media planning, earned media planning, editorial calendars, all those things.
So I think, first of all, I think people have realized that, we can do a lot remotely through Zoom and not necessarily always having to be in an office environment to be productive. That's number one. Number two, I think having, and I've always felt very strongly that it's important to have an amazing partnership with your agency because they are an extension of your team. And at the end of the day, there is this sort of culture that you build and sort of this teamwork where if the agency is an extension of your team, then basically it kind of becomes sort of your day-to-day in terms of, reporting and refining performance, looking at performance metrics, shifting spend, adjusting spend levels. So I would say that the world that we're in now, having that good, strong agency relationship is going to help you actually perform even better in the world that we're in, because retailers are now pivoting because you have a couple of buckets, right? You have some folks that their business is so, really just taken off, like I said, grocery, et cetera. And they're constantly reacting on a daily basis, whether it's, increasing media spend, et cetera. And then you have sort of the other group of folks that are kind of doing everything internally, that have that expertise, that have not worked with an outside agency. But it really, I think fundamentally, it comes down to, the size of your business, the size of your team, and your ability to actually, do you have that talent in-house, or do you leverage a strong external partner that can help you get there?
Right. Cool. Are there any marketing channels that you're particularly excited about at the moment?
So I continue to be, super excited about social. Way back in the day, they said, when the internet came out, it was going to be about, content, commerce, and community, right? So the content and the commerce thing totally took off, right? The community thing, everybody tried, and it was a challenge. It just did not work. It didn't take off. And for me, now's the time. Now's the time where through social, we are so engaged, and on a daily basis. I don't know about you, but because I'm in the business, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I track everything, I follow people, and the amazing kind of content and the brands that I'm discovering now on Instagram and Facebook that I had no idea existed. For example, I found someone that shipped ice cream the other day. I think is a huge opportunity for retailers, right? And now you have other media like TikTok, for example, the ability to create stories, and influencers can talk about brands, et cetera. So, for me, it's a real exciting time. I think that the community aspect, or i.e. now what we're going to call social commerce, I think is really, really about to take off now. I think we're in a really good place. And I think the fundamental difference is consumers are getting much more comfortable at actually shopping via their phone. They're comfortable shopping on their phone, buying, browsing on their phone, et cetera. And I think that's what's fundamentally different now versus where it was years ago. So that's why I think social commerce and being able to leverage social to drive sales, et cetera, is a really great time now for retailers and from a consumer standpoint.
Right, right. One of the things we're seeing a lot of, I'm not sure if it's just us, but I would say probably half of our biz dev pipeline at the moment is media and marketing plan audits. It took a pandemic for people to suddenly decide that the media plan they have now and the marketing plan they have now probably isn't the right one for next year, because next year is going to be completely different than any other year, as is this year.
Yes.
So, we're taking advantage, obviously, because some of these marketing and media plans have been horrible for 10 years. And it's just, we're finally getting a chance to take a look at them. But do you have any thoughts on the way in which sort of senior level, C-suite should be looking at this as an opportunity to sort of like really shake things up with regards to, their media and marketing plans?
That's a really great question, right? So, when I was in my CMO role, really, having a large budget that was across digital and traditional media, so print, radio, TV, et cetera, we were super focused on the shift to digital. But in order to shift and make those changes, fundamentally what it comes down to, Kevin, and you know this better than anybody, is it's really an attribution discussion, right? So what I think we've gotten a lot better at in the last couple of years, and retailers have really invested in, and I think we're getting better at, is really understanding what the offline attribution is for digital media, right? So there are definitely providers out there that can help you with that, the LiveRamps of the world, et cetera, that can help you to identify, okay, I viewed an ad on Facebook and I actually transacted in a store. So I think the first point is, do you have a good attribution methodology? So because digital is not only just driving, ROAS to your e-commerce business, it's actually driving your store business as well, your offline business. So I think the attribution piece is super important. So once you have that solid attribution, or at least good enough that you're comfortable with it, it's never, as you know, 100%, because customers like to transact across, they basically can get an email, go out to Facebook, then go to an affiliate. So you really have to understand the customer journey. But I think once you have a solid attribution methodology, then you feel better about shifting to digital, because right now the consumer is home, right? I mean, he or she is home, and they're on their phone, they're consuming a ton of social media. So it's a great opportunity to shift to digital. And if you can do a good job from an attribution standpoint, you have a better view of, I make the investment here, it's driving, 2-to-1 online, but I'm also driving 3-to-1 in stores.
Right, right. One interesting byproduct that we noticed, we bought 3 hyper-personalized direct mail companies, sort of the wide 4-color lasers. They can do postcards, they can do custom covers on catalogs, they can do pretty much anything. But one of the unexpected sort of silver linings with the consumer being home is that our direct mail response is up dramatically for our clients, because now it's exciting when the postal carrier arrives, because they usually got Amazon with them.
Right.
And
I
so
look forward to go to my mailbox. It's my reason to get out of the house some days. So
exactly. So it's amazing how direct mail is. We've really seen a spike in the effectiveness of that particular channel. So is there anything else that you see that's working that was sort of an unexpected spike in effectiveness or efficiency?
Well, first of all, I've always been a believer in direct mail. Okay, I've always been a believer. I think I like to see. There'll always be catalogs in the mailbox. There'll always be direct mail pieces. I think direct mail has gotten a lot better and more creative over the years. Like, there are organizations out there that can do direct mail retargeting, which is amazing. That you can view a product online and get a postcard within a few days with that product. So that's really exciting. I think again, to your point, consumers are home. They're reading their mail. The direct mail response rates are up. I think we've gotten a lot better at personalization than we ever have. But again, I think it comes down to, you know, my initial point about the API, right? So fundamentally, you have to invest in data accessibility. You have the CDPs of the world, customer data platforms, et cetera, because we've had all this data in, you know, stuck in our databases for years. And it was okay from a direct mail standpoint, but to be able to have that full personalization experience that you can identify Milton Pappas when he's on the site, you know that he just got a direct mail piece, you know if he's on his on a mobile device versus a desktop. I think the common thread across all this is to really be able to do good personalization and good targeting, regardless of what the medium is. So what you just described is a perfect example, I think. So
Right, right. Great. And obviously, periods of disruption tend to also be periods of opportunity if you happen to notice them. You know, are there any opportunities? Obviously, you're pursuing one of them right now with your AI-based shopping feeds and such. But you know, are there any other interesting things you think will change? Clearly, Quibi is not one of the opportunities.
yes,
but
yes.
there's certainly some others.
Yes. So, you know, it's interesting. So TikTok is obviously just taken off, right? So it's really, you know, amazing to see how consumers are consuming content, right? So I think the key, the fundamental kind of what I always view in terms of content delivery, being able to create content, whether it's UGC, whether it's content created by a retailer. I think these content plays, TikTok, some of the cool things that are happening now with Reels, I guess it is, on Facebook and Instagram, and making it easier for the consumer to create their own content, I think is a trend that's going to continue. It's going to be very strong. And, you know, part of that, one of the outcomes has been, you know, influencer marketing programs, for example, right? So the fact that a consumer can actually create content and with partnering with a retailer, if you will, I think is a trend that's going to continue. And then I think from a media perspective, then the fundamental question is always, how am I going to monetize that, right? How am I going to be able to leverage that to whether it's sell advertising, sell targeted content, et cetera. So, you know, I'm excited about what's happening in the social space right now. I think, you know, as retailers now are much more focused on e-commerce and investing in infrastructure. Personalization now is more important than it's ever been, in my opinion, because the retailers experience, you know, they want more now. They're home, they're shopping online, and it's first and foremost, I think, one of the most important things right now that we need to be focusing on. And as it relates to media, as it relates to your e-commerce experience, and even your brick and mortar experience, right? To be able to recognize Milton Pappas visiting a store.
Right, right. So Minority Report style.
Yes.
One of the other trends, which is sort of changing the mix for some of our clients, partially because we're recommending it, is sort of a doubling down on earned media, right? Because the ad blocker situation has been a real, you know, bane to marketers trying to reach particular audiences, particularly millennials. And interestingly, it's shifted in the last 5 years, our SEO strategy to be, you know, SERP dominance, right? No longer just getting our own clients to rank for their own domain name, but really thinking about a digital PR and or an influencer marketing plan and or branded content plans, which mean that, you know, positive things are going to be said about you all over the place, right? And you never know which one of those positive things might show up in a Google SERP.
Right.
And some of those things might be paid, some of those things might not be paid, you know, and to some extent it sort of revitalized the interest in different forms of earned media, traditional PR, digital PR,
Yes.
earned media, social, et cetera. You know, we tend to sometimes get overly focused on paid media, right? Because it's under our direct and immediate control.
Right.
But it's such a fuzzy line now. Like, you know, a social post is a social post till you boost it, then it's advertising.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. Totally agree. And
that
you know,
goes.
Right. SEO is a great example, right? But so there's always a cost to something, right? And nothing's ever free. People like, oh, natural search traffic is free. Well, if your site, URL structure, having copy blocks on your site so that Google can crawl, your page is being crawlable. So it still requires to have a strategy around it, and it's just a little bit more technical when the site comes in, and being able to partner with your technology friends. But I would agree, it comes back to kind of like a holistic consumer strategy, right? To be able to think about all these, not just paid. I create my content, and I have to think about, to your point, what am I doing in terms of PR? What am I doing on social, organic, and paid? What am I doing on Google? My product feed's optimized. Is my site optimized for SEO? So it is part of a holistic strategy that marketers need to think about. It's not like, okay, I'm only thinking about my paid media budget, and I'm not going to worry about this piece over here. It's all interrelated into a holistic strategy.
Yeah, it's part of why we made 11 acquisitions in 8 years, because
Smart.
we realized the interaction effects between the media were increasing, and that the lines were getting much blurrier. So
Totally agree. Totally agree. Which makes the attribution even more challenging, right?
yes, yes, of course. Well, no, if it was easy, anybody could do it.
That's
We'd
right.
not be out of a job.
That's right.
Well,
That's right.
Milton, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to having you on again in the future,
Great. I enjoyed it.
getting an update on your new venture.
Great. Thanks so much, Kevin. Appreciate it. Great to be here.